On today's puckish episode, we take you through the gritty, harsh, brutalizing, unfair, super depressing, but overall super fun and dandy world of Berserk. We talk about our first expectations and experiences with the 1990 manga and 97 anime adaptation. Also, I might have accidentally insulted an entire culture and or country on this episode. That was my bad, totally unintentional. But anywho, much fun awaits on the Pitch Pod. Welcome to the Pitch Pod. We are the Pod Trio, and we are here to pitch you on all things nerdy, geeky, dorky, dweeby, and lame. I am broken. We'll get into it later with our Berserk pitch. Thank you to Victor. Guys, I'll be real with you. I have a pretty weak constitution, and this one made me sick. In order to keep this thing going throughout the week, in order to keep reading, I definitely had to watch a little bit of some of the easygoing films. I watched 50 First Dates again.
I'm sorry I made you do that.
I
watch 50 First Dates.
Well, first off, that is a fantastic film. But secondly, there's some content out there that might be a little more serious than others. And also, complete fair warning, we'll definitely be talking about some heavier things in this episode just based off of the content. But yeah, I'm tuckered out.
Yeah, Berserk didn't leave a whole lot for anything else to do over the past week. I tried playing Pillars of Eternity, which is a Obsidian RPG that came out a while back, and it's one of those things I keep wanting to like CRPGs, like top-down Dungeons and Dragons inspired RPGs.
What's
the most
the
famous
stand
recent
for?
one's probably Divinity Original Sin. And I own Divinity Original Sin, and also bounced off
I was
it.
actually thinking of Baldur's Gate too. That's how.
Well, I bounced off the original Baldur's Gate. That was kind of where this rabbit hole all started.
For a complete noob like me, what is the C in CRPG stand for?
Computer. It's basically a Western RPG. So JRPG is your more turn-based, Pokemon-esque RPG. CRPGs tend to be more D&D inspired in Western RPGs. Baldur's Gate did literally use D&D rules. So, yeah, I might just not like that. I like the idea of it. I like the characters. I like the ethic. Be good, be bad, be neutral. I like the spectrum of stuff. I just can't seem to break into it.
Are you a be good guy or a be bad guy?
I want to be neutral.
Of course.
Every time I've tried playing so far, I've tried to do, chaotic neutral. I just want to be this puckish character making a mess for both sides.
I bet Victor is the tyrannical. Is there what's the worst kind of character you can be in these games? Just bad.
What, chaotic evil?
I'm
Just
surprisingly
chaotic.
a good person, Grant. I can't even do Renegade and Mass Effect.
Says the guy who pitched it. Says the guy who is like, we need to do Berserk now, and you guys will all love it.
Yeah, because it's compelling. Because it's good. That's separate. That's not the same thing.
Oh man, this is also coming from the
true.
guy.
It's not the same thing as good.
This is also coming from the guys that me like SpongeBob and
dude, SpongeBob Berserk crossover.
So one of the things before we get into our headlines, I wanted to throw out to you all as a blind pitch. I have put a YouTube video in our show notes that will hopefully end up in our podcast notes. So, dear listener, if you would like to play along, whenever I give the word, I will ask Grant and Victor to click on the link. It's a 30-second video. They, to my knowledge, have not seen it before, or if they've seen it in their own lives. It's kind of hard to do a blind pitch if you say, hey, have you seen? So, just kind of hoping for the best here.
Yeah.
So, Grant, Victor, if you want to prepare yourselves for what's about to happen, go ahead and click on this YouTube video.
Preparing, stretching a little bit, getting ready. There we go.
And 3, 2, 1.
Colt 45, huh?
So you got to see your childhood friend, Lando Calrissian,
Yeah.
hocking.
I was wondering
Colt
who the hell that
45s.
was. Billy D. Williams. Okay.
I now want to drink some Colt 45. Man.
Billy D. Williams.
That was a compelling
He was
commercial.
the spokesman for Colt
That
45
worked.
in the 80s.
2 zigzags. Maybe that's all we need. That's the only Colt 45. Yeah, that's the only Colt 45 references I can get.
Afro Man. Yeah.
With my, yeah, exactly. That is a abhorrent song, but one that I will sing to the T, word for word, nevertheless. Yeah. That is, what, how'd you find this? Just Reddit?
I spent some time on the internet.
Fair.
I just feel like, I don't know, I was I was hanging out with a friend, and they were like, hey, did you know Billy D did beer commercials? I was like, no. So we watched some Billy D. Williams Colt 45s.
Right.
And so, we got into, why you always want to have 2 Colt 45s around? You never know when you'll need one for a friend when company comes over.
Right out of his
That's
hand.
awesome.
Yeah. So it's a small kernel of pure joy in the world.
Exactly. In this dark, desperate times, all the negative things that are happening in the world and all the Berserk manga I've had to read, that definitely was the highlight of my week.
All the Berserk manga you've had to read, all of the Snyderverse Justice League trailer I've had to watch.
You want to say that one more time?
I
knew you were trying to transition, but I couldn't hear it.
I said all of the Berserk, all the tough times in the world, the Berserk manga you've had to read, all of the Justice League Snyder Cut trailer I've had to watch.
Yes. I guess, yeah, we'll move on to the headline. Obviously, the biggest thing that's happened this week is DC Fandome. What wasn't released yesterday? That was crazy. Obviously, we'll get into everything that was released. Personally, the one thing I wanted to talk about, the Wonder Woman trailer, thought was good. Batman trailer,
so good.
Sounded very interesting.
Oh.
Obviously the Snyder Cut.
It looks terrible.
Ooh.
Looks like pretentious bullshit. I hate it.
Damn. Okay.
You know that scene in Man of Steel?
Yeah.
Where Clark goes into the church and starts talking about self-sacrifice, and it just pans to the image of Jesus over his shoulder. It's going to be 2 hours of that.
Of
2 extra hours of
Superman,
that. Why
Jesus
people
allegory?
think that's good or artistic? Yeah, I don't know why people, I watched the extended cut of Batman vs. Superman that people were like, it makes it better, it explains more. Didn't make it, entertaining.
Yeah.
The one thing I went into Batman vs. Superman prepared to forgive anything, but the movie was boring, and I could not forgive that. This movie's for adults, was his response to criticism about the trailer. Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm like, this movie's for first-year film students.
Fuck off. Oh my god. I love Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, but doing a trailer that has almost no dialogue and just
shot after
never
shot.
before seen footage that doesn't really mean anything, it was just pretentious, stupid.
Yeah.
Grant, what are your thoughts? I bogarted. How do you follow that?
I mean, I feel like...
Tell us how much you liked it.
That's, I thought it was a cool trailer, but I also, I haven't seen in its entirety Batman v Superman just because the initial reviews were like, this is long and boring. And then when I saw that they're going to make it longer, it's like,
No, longer
okay.
and more boring.
Right. Rarely does making the movie longer make it a better movie. The whole point of the editor is to make it a better movie by making it shorter.
Right. There's some directors cuts that work, but overall it's exactly like you said, taking a movie and making it 30 minutes longer. I really don't see it bringing that much extra to the table. Will I still probably watch it? Yeah, just to see what all the hoo-ha's about, but the main thing I wanted to talk about is actually that Suicide Squad trailer, because I am doing my damnedest not to buy back in. It's taking every single little bit of willpower I have. The first Suicide Squad movie pissed me off more than any other film in the entirety of cinema history. Yeah, I had such absolute high hopes for that film, and it was so bad. We talked about first year film school. I feel like, as someone who has approximately 1 month, 2 months of YouTube education on film editing, could do a better job than Suicide Squad. But that's neither here nor there. I watched the trailer and it looks absolutely amazing, and I'm pissed off. because what's gonna happen is they're gonna drop another trailer and they're gonna have a bunch of more cool music thrown in there, and they're gonna show fucking, what's his face? They're gonna show Idris Elba and Pete Davidson and Nathan Fillion and all these guys, and I'll be like, that's cool, I need to watch it, and I'm gonna sit in and whatever. Did you guys watch the trailer?
I have not seen it yet.
I mean, I wouldn't even call it a trailer. It was like a sizzle reel.
Right.
It was a character reveal.
It was a character reveal. And, if you look at the cast, there is a solid 15 names there that are just absolute A-list actors. I guarantee what's going to happen is they're going to pull a Deadpool 2, there it is, and have 8 of these guys just bite the dust within the first 5 minutes of the film.
Yeah, that's what Suicide Squad
is about.
You're supposed to expect from Suicide.
Right.
You add 15 people, 10 of them are cannon fodder. I would almost put money that Nathan Fillion is the first one to die.
What is Nathan Fillion's character? Arm Fall Off Boy. That is the best name. It's Arm Fall Off Boy. That is the best name for a supervillain of all time. They have Polka Dot Man.
Quilt Man.
What?
Wasn't Quilt Man in there?
I think that might have been Polka Dot Man.
Oh. Okay.
But they have, the Thinker. The Javelin is played by Flula Borg. It's going to be an absolute abhorrent. How many times are you going to use the word abhorrent? It's going to be a bad movie. I'm going to watch it anyway, and I'm going to be pissed off that I watched it. Long story short.
I mean, it is under entirely new direction. James Gunn is making this movie. Don't get me wrong, I don't think the problem with the last movie was its direction. It was studio interference.
Yes.
But I think James Gunn has been pretty clear on what he was doing and not having the studio interfere with it. I think it'll be a good movie. If you've seen it, it'll probably be R-rated. James Gunn has done well with R-rated material. Didn't he do Super movie with...
Oh, I didn't like that, though.
The guy who played Dwight.
Yeah, I didn't like Rainn Wilson.
Well, it's second year film school movie.
Oh, okay. My fucking peanut brain can't comprehend.
Yeah, I was disappointed in the original Suicide Squad, and I had high hopes for it. I wanted it to be very good, and it was not. But it was passable. I ended up watching it in a very nice independent theater in Maine because I was just out hiking, and me and my friend who were out hiking both wanted to watch the Suicide Squad, so we took a diversion from nature to go into town and watch the Suicide Squad in this idyllic Maine town that was probably haunted after dark.
Yeah, that's amazing. I don't know. I think I haven't seen the first film since it came out. Oh shit, how many years ago now? 5 or 6? But
roughly.
I think my expectations were just so high. It was definitely my most anticipated film of that year, that when I watched it and I see the fire dude, whose name I've completely just blocked out from my memory, be like, we're a family.
Wasn't it El Diablo?
El Diablo. It's like, we're a family. Vin Diesel type shit. And I'm like, dude, you guys met each other 6 hours ago. And you hated each other's guts half an hour ago. Here's hoping, James Gunn, while definitely he has produced some great movies, and this completely seems in his wheelhouse. I just don't want to get burned again.
Any consolation, the Suicide Squad game that's coming out looks like it's in good hands, for sure. I mean, the concept looks moderately interesting. It's a 4-player co-op game. You have to kill the Justice League. That's the name, actually. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Yes, Superman's gonna be a raid boss or some shit. It's gonna be tight. It's the same studio that did the Arkham Asylum games.
It'll be Marvel Ultimate Alliance, but DC Universe.
I hope it's not, though.
DC Universe, Infamous
Ultimate Alliance, it's it was fine, right? If you were into RPGs, it was kind of it was just basically that, wasn't it? It was just an RPG with superhero elements.
Not even an RPG. It's just a smash 'em up game. It's closer to Dynasty Warriors than it is to Dragon Quest.
Was it? Because not visually, it looked like if you took Gauntlet and then added some light RPG elements, and then boom, that was Marvel Ultimate Alliance. I hope this one is more like the Arkham series games, or like the new Avengers game that came out. That was pretty tight, I thought.
That's a separate conversation. That also looks terrible. And it's
Really?
weird how I have now transitioned to the Grant role of hating everything that comes up. I love DC Comics so much, and I'm just like, oh, evil Superman. That's a novel idea. We didn't do that in 2 Injustice games.
I feel like we alternate that role quite well. It's just one episode, I hate everything, and then the next episode, Andrea hates everything.
I'm just the monolithic, just never impressed.
Everything's
Right.
It's
okay.
There's just sitting over there like Buddha waiting to be moved.
6 out of 10.
I'm kind of like counter IGN. Like everything is just, for me a 5 out of 10 really is like the most common.
Right. 7.4. Too much water.
IGN doesn't use the point system anymore.
What?
I said IGN doesn't use the point system anymore.
They don't? Is it dead
Why'd
meme?
they take it out?
Because it created too much emphasis on what score a thing was getting instead of how people were describing a thing, because reviewing is inherently a flawed process. So they would look at something and be like, why did X get a 7.4 but this got a 7.5? So they just were trying to draw to eliminate some of the confusion. And for the record, 7.5 is it's a perfectly good game.
No, I would love to talk about that, because what I absolutely hate is when someone is like, yeah, that was a 7. That was good. And then someone else is like, oh, you gave it a 7? Why did it suck? And I'm like, no, 7 means good. This is not like high school. This is...
No, I see your point where people just assume that because it got a 7 out of 10, because nobody really knows what that means anymore.
Right.
Because everyone just assumes it's a bad thing because it's a C, because we somehow associate review scores to grades. That
the American high school education system.
We've taken I think that's the explanation right there. The fact that that's the most common scale that all of us understand. So we kind of automatically apply that. Whenever we give something a 5 out of 10, people assume that's a failing grade rather than average.
Yeah, you got a 50.
Yeah,
on a test.
You understand. It's oh shit.
I feel like, we our expectations, and I feel like this is one of those things. It's more particular. I don't know how it is in the game world, but it is definitely particular to film. That actually, let me rephrase. I think it's even worse in television, because I'll see a movie and I see it in that 7 range, and I'll be like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna give this a shot. If I see a TV show in the 7 range, I'm like, oh hell no, that sucks, because I feel like our
I think a 7 just indicates you need to have interest in the subject matter.
Oh, for sure.
Go on.
Yeah, 7, that range is just you need to have some interest. Will it appeal to everybody? No. But if it's hey, you like, using Berserk as the example, Berserk is a 7. You like Game of Thrones and this kind of thing, you like Berserk. Is it a 10 for everybody? No. But it's a 7, which might make it a 10 for you.
Okay.
It's precisely because it's so heavy that yeah, in that case, I totally understand what you're saying. There are very few things that kind of transcend their genre where a lot of people are going to like it. Kind of like Game of Thrones, at least the first couple of seasons, how almost everybody was into it. That's definitely a rarity.
Right.
Well, we can use this to move on to the pitch. Vic,
Yeah.
have your go at it.
So this week we're talking about Berserk. It's a dark fantasy manga. Started in '89. It's ongoing today. Had a great anime in '97. Fun fact: it was actually animated by the same studio that animated the original Pokemon anime, and it had an adaptation. It had an adequate CG movie revival. We don't talk about the 2016 or 2017 adaptation. It was pretty bad. But
those are
Yeah.
legendary.
We don't acknowledge that. Basically, series can get pretty dark. It's very heavy scenes, as I'm sure the two of you can attest. I did have you read through the first 2 arcs. I don't know. I'd say it's probably a bit more controversial than the Game of Thrones series was, but it's personally, I think, one of the best stories I've ever read, start to finish. Well, not even finish. It's because, as I said, it's still ongoing, but it's probably one of the best I've ever read.
It will never finish. We'll talk about that eventually.
Yeah, about how this fucking series is just like Game of Thrones in that there's always this massive hiatus in between every installment. But basically, my exposure to it was I don't know if you remember those top 10 anime lists on YouTube, the really old school ones.
Watch Mojo.
No, dude, this is before
Pre-Watch Mojo.
Pre-Watch Mojo. That's right. This is like they would play it and then a little snippet of the show, and maybe it would be almost an AMV, and you'd just be like, all right, let me see this guy's opinion. It's just a matter of your opinion, man. But anyway, Berserk would consistently show up, and I always assumed that it was some hyper violent OVA, like Ninja Scroll or Devilman, and I wasn't interested in some vapid, super bloody action, so I never followed up on it. But it wasn't until an old friend of mine had the '97 collection, and he was like, "Yo, watch this," that I actually took the plunge, and I never looked back, especially after that ending. I was just I have to know what happened happens next. This is too terrible.
Right.
So the 97 anime only reaches until like the end of the second arc, where there's this massive upset that we'll talk about. But I had to find out what happens, and it was actually the first manga I ever read.
The inception to your weebdom.
My very light weebdom. It's just a hint of weeb.
Just a couple sprinkles.
Just the tip.
So for the audience, yes, that is where in the manga that I read, remember that I was responsible for the manga this week, and then Andrew was responsible for watching the 25 episode 1997 anime. So yeah, it was definitely an arduous task in front of us. I guess you have any initial questions for us, Victor?
Yeah, I finally want to know, like, what do you think? Just give me your just your base interest. Like, what did you like primarily? 2 or 3 points, probably sufficient.
Right. I think that obviously because Andrew and I had different mediums in which that we consumed this material, our opinions will differ in some areas. This show, or this manga, at least for me, was very dark and very gruesome, and content that my innocent little PG self wasn't quite used to, but I kept reading. And it wasn't because I had to keep reading for the sake of the pitch pod, but rather I was pulled in. What this manga does so well, at least particularly in that Golden Age arc, which makes up the large majority of both the manga and I think almost the entirety, if not all of the anime.
It's all of the anime. It ends at the eclipse.
Yeah.
In the middle of the eclipse, rather.
Right. You know, what it does so well is it connects you to this squad. I felt, even though I knew what was going to happen, because this material was created literally 30 years ago, so it's impossible to not have a tiny bit of an idea of what was happening, at least for me, I still bought it. I was still connected. The relationship that the manga created with the characters was perfect, and I loved the small bits in between the huge, mega, wild action scenes.
I particularly really liked the art. The art was like the number one standout for me in the manga. Like at the beginning during Black Swordsman, it's like a little bit off, but by like mid Golden Age, it's fantastic. What did you feel about the animation, Andrew, since you had to watch the 97 series?
I mean, I thought the animation was fine. It was gorgeous. I loved the first episode, and I loved the last episodes in terms of what it was showing me. The stuff in between did not feel remarkable in any way. Like, the Golden Age arc was boring in an anime.
Really?
I had no connection to anybody because I just knew or assumed they were all going to die. So and the fact that you're spending more time but not getting to learn truly anything about the characters. You get little snippets here and there towards maybe episode 17 or 18, like as they're winding down, they're like, oh yeah, we forgot to make you care about anybody. But I mean, the animation was fine. It was very beautiful, and the juxtaposition between buckets of blood and interesting monsters. The first episode of the anime is him fighting the Viper monster.
The Snake Baron.
And that was a much more interesting story than anything that followed for 23 episodes.
You're not wrong.
So the fact that
I felt the same way.
You showed me something cool and then inexplicably time jumped back, and then another small time jump for an episode in that time jump where he goes back to even further. It was inexplicable storytelling to me. Like, I get, hook 'em, but we already know Guts is doomed, whatever that means, in episode 1 and alone. So the fact that you're showing me the Golden Age, I'm like, oh cool, this is all going to go to hell. I'm just waiting for it to happen. Like, it has the Star Wars prequel
I
problem.
think the manga does a better job of building up that entire of building up the setup. There are some things that I think the animation obviously like totally nails. Like the music in the animation, something exclusive, of course, to the show. I really liked the music. Guts' theme is fantastic. I actually take the time to listen to it whenever I read the manga. But I mean, the art and the character development in the manga is slower, but it's also a bit better. There are also characters that are completely missing from the anime.
Right. Yeah. For Victor, do us a favor and just everything off the top that you can do for me, because it seems that like while we agree on some things, like my experience and Andrew's experience were definitely different. So please, if you could explain why you think or what differences the two different mediums had.
Sure.
For us to get that experience.
Personally, I sided with Andrew because when I watched the anime originally, I was like, this is boring. Like this entire Golden. Maybe the part where like Griffith and Guts have a duel and Guts totally owns him and then walks away. That shit was amazing. I thought that was actually like pretty. I was like, wow, that was sick. And then of course you get to the eclipse. That was incredible too. But as far as like differences, let's see. Puck isn't in the anime at all. The Skull Knight isn't in the anime at all. Let's see. The king, that whole relationship with the king and the princess, like towards the end.
In the very beginning.
Towards the eclipse. That's not in the anime. Wild isn't in the anime.
Yeah.
And the anime ends with Guts getting his eye plucked out, but the manga continues a little bit after that. Mm-hmm. So he ends on a cliffhanger, and you get the resolution more or less to what happens. In fact, I had you read up until where they pick up on the Black Swordsman arc again.
Yeah.
And it goes into something called the Lost Children arc, which is like 2 years afterwards. So those basically summarize the differences.
What it boils, because like with a television show, it's hard to buy in to a show that is going to be 50, 100 plus episodes, right? So you have to take the meat of the story and try to make something out of it.
Yeah.
Whereas with manga or, anything written, I mean, it's pretty much an expectation, the amount of time. There isn't necessarily a cap of the amount of time you need to keep reading something. I don't know. That's a shame. While I don't think necessarily the differences you mentioned made an overwhelming difference, particularly like Puck is cute, but I mean, Puck is a fairy. No, my bad. Wrong mythology. Puck is an elf
that looks like a pixie, basically. It's like
exactly. That becomes Guts's companion, and he sprinkles his little fairy dust to basically allow Guts to recover from his wounds, because
because he's fighting apostles, which is what those monsters are called.
Exactly. This guy gets stabbed 20 times a page, so he needs that little boost there. Puck it's kind of comic relief, which I don't think is necessarily bad for this manga, one that is so tonally negative, but I don't think it would have improved the anime by any means. I think also like Skull Knight, very cool. I don't think it would have changed everything. And Wild, is it Wild?
Yeah, the gorilla guy.
Frankly, that just kind of disturbed me. So I'm not like. I think what it boils down to is that character connection.
Just to interject, the anime absolutely needed somebody to be fun and funny, because it was the most sour, unjoyful thing I've watched in a long time.
Damn.
It's had absolutely no joy at all.
Yeah, it was just punch in the gut followed by punch in the gut
from start to finish.
Fair. Maybe Puck would have figures. Puck would have saved Andrew's experience.
Because in the anime, you kind of forget that there's a fantasy element to this,
right? Until
Zod shows up,
right?
And then immediately leaves.
And they ratchet it up, right? That's the Nosferatu creature.
Yeah,
right?
Nosferatu Zod.
Yeah, like it shows up and you're like, okay, this is a reminder of what I found interesting. And then he's gone, and then nothing else shows up for 10 episodes until there's the eyeball does a weird thing, and then suddenly we're off to the races with Hieronymus, Bosch creatures, and Geiger nightmares coming out.
That's kind of one of the more interesting aspects about the art, is how he's able to capture that same feeling as Hieronymus Bosch. And I haven't seen anybody do an equivalent to that, basically in the time between Hieronymus Bosch and Kentaro Miura.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. It's crazy how disturbing.
And that's where I'm like, that's the interesting part of the anime and the art, but I've already feel burned by 20 episodes of being like, I don't like how this guy does writing, to where I'm like, even if it looks interesting now, I'm not sure I want to invest the time in going forward.
I think at least because I've continued to read, based off of my experience, I've continued to read the manga, and it does seem like the remainder is going to focus heavily on that apostle side, or at least those relationships. But similarly to like any show with demon or monster, like the prevalent theme of those stories is going to be, yes, there are these demons, but the real demons are ourselves.
Yeah, actually, pretty good summation of what happens afterward. It's especially noteworthy that, like, I know, Andrew, you didn't experience this part because it's not in the anime, but that sword that Guts gets, that big sword, he doesn't acquire that until after the eclipse. And incidentally, the story behind it is that blacksmith that Guts lives with, he ironically makes that sword and calls it the Dragon Slayer because a noble pays him. He's like, oh, I want some fancy sword that could kill a dragon. And Godo, the blacksmith, is like, oh, you want something that can kill a dragon? And he makes this giant slab of iron.
Right.
And he's
Almost
like,
ironically.
boom, use that. And it actually pisses off the noble. And that's actually why Godo lives alone in the mountains with that little girl, is because he had to run away.
Yeah.
So Godo makes another sword for Guts as he goes around, trying to kill apostles. And the sword breaks. And Guts, in a moment of desperation, like sees the Dragon Slayer and picks it up. And he's like the only one who can use it because he's been fighting with giant sword literally his entire life. It's kind of like training up to that moment. So that's how he picks it up. And it was in that moment when he does that, they bring up like a bunch of Nietzschean concepts, kind of like the Ubermensch, and how if you stare into the abyss too long, the abyss will stare back into you, and how to beat a monster, you have to become a monster. And it's just always like strung throughout the entire anime. But basically the fact is that since Guts is the only one who can kill these monsters, he has to become a monster. And that's what we see during the Black Swordsman arc, is the result of that kind of thought process on a person, how it whittles them down, especially when they on their search for revenge.
So bringing up Nietzsche and the philosophy of Berserk, number one, in the anime, Grant, reading the manga, this may have been better for you, but the nihilism of Berserk is, it comes at the beginning in things are just happening, we're all on a string. Victor, the opening by heart.
Yeah, because the voice is so sick, that's why.
Right, everything is so meaningless. And slowly, Griffith's one meaning is ambition, but otherwise he has no, people's actions have no meaning for him. People just do things. He mentions that whenever he's talking to the guy on the battlefield. It's like, it's weird to me you call that what we did an act of love, as for me it was just a means to an end. Like Guts at the beginning is just going through motions and has no significant development until suddenly around episode 19 or 20 he gets this inner monologue and won't stop thinking aloud to us, which was a jarring thing. And then Casca, who has no self-agency whatsoever and just does and acts and mostly yells and cries.
I think that's kind of like, I see that as like a prevailing theme in Berserk, that a lot of people just kind of go through the motions. And I actually think that the story itself, like up until the eclipse, serves as a good warning not to throw yourself into the ambitions of another person, that you still have to have your own self-agency. Because if you remember, there are parts in the manga and in the anime, they have that whole bonfire of dreams speech, where, Guts is mentioning like, oh, there are a bunch of men in my troop who want to do something after the war. Like, this guy wants to be a tailor. This guy wants to get promoted to commander so he can be worthy of marrying this girl. And all of them, in their pursuit of their individual dreams, have tied it to the success of Griffith's greater one.
Right.
And I mean, you don't want to do that, because at the end of the day, if you really commit yourself to someone else's success and they're only driven by their own success, that makes you disposable to them.
No, I think what I derive that, like, Andrew, your interpretation of like their ambition, I think like what I got from particularly Guts and Griffith, like the main points, was less ambition. It was more just like finding purpose in a potentially purposeless world. Something that I think we as just regular people struggle with in general. And Griffith's overwhelming urge to be a champion, to be the king of his own country. That served, like, he was willing to do anything and everything for that. I think it was very well explained in the manga, like how whenever you have a goal, he was willing to do anything to, like, his purpose meant something to him, and that purpose was worthy of crossing anyone and doing anything. With Guts, the hint as to why he lives is because his purpose initially is, okay, I'm going to serve Griffith all the way, just like the rest of the crew. And then at the end, he's like, no, I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to be an equal to this man, and I am going to find my own individual purpose in this world, whatever that may be.
And isn't that part of, like, the prophecy Vampire Dude throws out Victor, is that they are supposed to meet as equals? When this guy calls you brother, then you're doomed, or whatever.
Yeah, Nosferatu tells him that as soon as, basically, as you start to, if you and Griffith ever feel equal, like, that's the moment that that will spell your doom for the eclipse.
Right, which I assume is, and then Griffith later has the line where he said, I could never call any man my friend unless they were willing to part from me.
And then someone does it, and he can't handle it.
And he hates him, yeah. So, but I feel like that was a weird thing of, like, well, I never really, like, I guess they're equals, or it would seem that Guts has even surpassed him, which doesn't feel accounted for, which feels like a plot hole. But, so for, like, and it sounds indeed like the manga does a better job, because I don't remember this Bonfire of Dreams thing in the anime.
It's definitely in there.
Victor, I specifically remember thinking that Guts has no idea who any of his people are, and they have no idea who he is. Like, that was a constant thing for me, is, like, you're trying to show him developing, but you're not actually showing him having friends.
Right.
Or being part of anything. He's still, every time you see him, he's generally still acting alone. He's not acting as part of a unit or group.
Well, I thought that was the case at, like, the beginning, but there's times where he's, like, playing dice with his men. They always refer to him affectionately. And I swear that bonfire part is in the anime. It's, like, episode 20-something. It's, like, 22. You are right, though, when you're talking about how, like, all of this development comes thrust in towards the end. So it is there, but it's possible to get lost in the sauce,
Yeah, maybe I missed it in terms of everything else coming out, but, like, he spends the majority of the time not engaging with his men. Like, sure, I think he encourages them to drink or stuff and do that, but it's never as, like, it never seems truly affectionate. You see them trying to push him towards, like, hanging out with them and stuff early on when he first joins the party, and then you kind of get the impression that he's joined in, but he doesn't until the big push of characterization at the end. Here's my question for you guys in the manga. Does he have, like, thought bubbles for most of the Golden Age? Because he doesn't pick those up in the anime until solidly episode 20, 21, around the time when he's getting ready to leave.
Yeah, I think, are you talking about, like, exposition?
Like, just, do you know what Guts is thinking?
Yeah. I mean, like, I think exposition is something that happens pretty often, particularly in anime and manga. Like, I think that's just, it's something that we are less accustomed to, and frankly, I don't like it myself. I don't know what degree your experience was versus mine. I don't think it was abhorrent, or I don't think it was, like, overt.
Yeah, the manga is better paced in that sense.
Yeah, if you watch the anime, you have no idea that Guts has a thought in his head until around episode 20 or 21. Up until that point, the only thing about Guts, like, Guts doesn't have an interior monologue. The only thing you know about what Guts is thinking is by what Guts says out loud.
Yeah, you get that part. Maybe during the part where he kills 100 men by himself, he has a couple thoughts, but he's just pretty much focused on, like, now it's not the time for thinking.
Right.
Well, one major difference that came across to me just I was doing some mild research is the exclusion, and I bring this up because it may point to, like, your feelings on Guts, Andrew, but the exclusion of Donovan in the anime.
That's not in the anime.
This is very dark, and I'm actually, it's definitely, like, there's a good reason why this and many other things were cut out of the anime, but in particular with this character, this was a part of Guts' backstory when he was 9 and he was being raised by what's his father's name? Gambino. Gambino sold out his adopted son to Donovan, and when he was 9 years old, Donovan raped Guts. And ever since that moment, Guts, as a 9-year-old child till today, his inability to be around people was hurt, right? And then through the manga, what I enjoyed was like slowly but surely, after years of hatred and distrust towards people, he was able to slowly but surely build relationships and even become friends with the main crew, Judo and Pippin and Gaston, for it to thus be taken away once more, and now he's in that process of rebuild of trying to.
Right, that's the character arc. So basically, Guts gets born in like this really messed up way. Basically, his mother is like hung from a tree, and he was born simultaneously. So he's found there by this not prostitute, but kind of like this mercenary guy is his mistress.
Right.
And she takes care of him, and then she dies, and the mercenary captain raises Guts as a swordsman. And that's actually why Guts learns how to use an oversized sword, is because they don't make a sword in his size when he's a kid. They give him a normal one.
Child. Yeah.
And he learns to work with it, and he becomes specialized in it. And there's some resentment between this captain and Guts, because he's just like, dude, you're cursed. You killed my, not wife, but, you know, my favorite mistress, I guess. Mm-hmm. And it actually comes to a point where, you know, Gambino is pretty abusive. And yeah, he does sell Guts to Donovan. And Guts ends up killing Donovan in battle. That's his, like, little revenge. But it still, like, chips away at him. And then that night when Gambino gets drunk and tries to kill Guts, in the anime, they don't mention this because Donovan doesn't exist, but Gambino straight up tells Guts that he sold him to Donovan. He's like, yeah, I sold you for like 10 pieces of silver. It was nothing. And when he tries to kill Guts, Guts kills Gambino. He's pretty messed up about it. People find him and they run away, and that part's consistent. But that's actually why he has that whole thing about, like, you know, don't touch me. I don't want to talk to anybody. Leave me alone. That whole mentality is rooted in that childhood trauma that he suffered. It actually also manifests itself during that the Casca, the sex scene he has with Casca, where he starts to like flash back to that time with Donovan, and he's in a very emotionally vulnerable place, and Casca is pretty accepting of it, and actually helps him like work through it.
Let's talk about Casca. Unless you had a point, Andrew.
That sounds good. That sounds like the best thing Casca did that I didn't get to experience. Because for me, she was very much a non-character. Or rather, her characterization was just bad. She was billed as the second best fighter and then the third best fighter once Guts came in. Mm-hmm. And you have all this talk about how badass Casca is, but all of the evidence of this takes place off screen. Like, everything that happens to Casca when she is on screen subverts her supposed autonomy and authority and competency.
You think?
You know, 100%.
Like what part?
1000%.
Give me an example.
Okay, here's one, working backwards. It makes a big deal about how she is been holding the Hawks together for a year. The moment Guts gets back, she's like, okay, Guts, you can do this. I'm going to jump off this waterfall. So it's like, she's so strong. And then you get her in the private moment. She was like, okay, man, you big, strong dude, you can do this. I'm going to go kill myself. Later on, she's this great fighter, but she's getting schooled by the annoying general from the other side who we see 2 or 3 times. And this is when she gets knocked off the cliff and Guts has to go and rescue her.
Right. But she gets knocked off the cliff because she has her menstruation.
Right. So she's no longer a good fighter because of her women troubles.
Right. But I mean, that does happen. Like she later kills that guy.
But she only does it after being enabled by Guts. Guts is the one who's like, what are you doing? And then she's like, oh, yeah, right. And then she does the cool spin move.
Wait,
like,
but
everything she does is enabled by a dude. Like, she was still getting ready to die until Guts was like, why don't you do something? And then she does something.
Wait, are we talking about, because I'm talking about how, like, so Casca going into that one battle with Adon, she has her menstruation. It's particularly bad. And she's not at full fighting capacity. She gets thrown off. Guts goes after them. Yada yada yada. She runs away, but she does. I don't think she lacks like agency. I know for a fact that like at the battle of Doldry during that sandstorm, like her role is to take the castle, and she does. She even kills that same general after he like poisons her. She still manages to kill him.
Right. I think we're talking about the same thing, because that's the one she does that stick the sword in the ground and jump over and then slice him in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's still only after Guts is like, get your head in the game.
Is Guts there during that part?
No.
So.
You guys are thinking about two different things.
Yeah, I don't think he's there for that part. I think that was all her.
No, because
Guts is busy fighting the guy on the horse where
Boscan.
Yeah, where he gets the sword and then cuts off the guy's head. But then he came back
into, like, he killed that guy good and dead, and then came into the castle. Because he chopped off the guy's head and the horse's head.
I think those are happening simultaneously. Guts isn't there when Casca does that.
Casca has to have somebody get her head in the game, and she is the only woman in the troop.
My qualms with Casca aren't necessarily like that she is this puny woman that needs the help of every man. I do think that, like, in general, most, if not every single female character in the manga is definitely a weak point. And I think that is a significant trope in fantasy, just in general. Obviously, Game of Thrones is, like, helping to change that. But even as far back as, like, King Arthur's stuff, like, it's always been women are this defenseless thing. And created in 1990, something that's having to be built back up. Casca, I think, started well, at least in my eyes. Like, she did in the manga, I feel like, show her strength, and slowly but surely became more fodder for Griffiths versus Guts, as opposed to her own character. And then to continue the women train, I mean, Princess Charlotte just sucks. Like,
yeah.
I mean, that's just objective, like, dog, really. So I think that's definitely like a point in the show, and I would go even as far as to say that's just a point in Japanese culture almost, or at least like in the anime manga realm. Like, many of these men have a very hard time creating a genuine woman character that can stand on her own.
Yeah, I'll definitely concede that point for sure. I think that I mean, as far as Japan's opinion on or Japanese culture's like approach to women, it's definitely different from ours. Maybe more conservative, I guess you could say, or traditionalist, or I don't know, however you want to put it, really. But you're right. I do think that they don't perhaps display women as independently as we do in the West, or as we try to in the West. But I do think that Casca differs in the sense that, so her backstory as, like, you know, being sold off to a noble as a maid, and then the noble tries to take advantage of her, and Griffith provides her a sword to defend herself with. Like, I could see how one would interpret that as, oh, she's being enabled by a man, you know, because she's being given the option. But on the other hand, like, contextually, it's medieval society. Like, yeah, someone needs to show you that you can fight back, that there's something you can do. In this case, it just so happens to be Griffith, who's also, like, remarkably androgynous.
That you know, Griffith coming to save her. But even that goes, like, sure, that was a moment where she acted on her own accord, allowed to and able to by the actions of another person. But she is the one who drove that sword through the other guy.
Yeah.
But then it comes to, again, and also the one time she uses her agency really is when Griffith is like, come with me or don't, I don't care. Which again goes into how Griffith gets judged as, I never made anybody come with me, and the spirits call him, demons call him on it. It was like, oh, you never made anybody come with you. You just got everybody indebted to you and walked over their skulls. You know, and so, like, she's left with nowhere and nothing. She goes with him, which makes total sense. But then after that, you know, you're like, oh, she took a castle. Well, Griffith ordered her to take the castle. That's not an act of agency.
Right, but she chose to follow him. Like, that's her active choice.
But in the act of everyone else, she has put herself under Griffith's dream.
Right.
Like, her as a character, like, even at the moments where you're like, she'd rather go with Guts, she doesn't go with Guts. She stays with Griffith. Like, she's not acting of her own will and accord. She is beholden. She is acting, like, and again, that's the whole point of the story, is we're all just dangling on strings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in the idea of, does anybody have agency in it, it's a very Calvinist predestination story, and we're all just moving along towards our inevitable end goals.
Yeah. No, I think that there's to its credit, to this manga's credit, this creation, there is a lot here that the creator, what's the creator's name?
Kentaro Miura. There's a lot here that Miura wants us to think about. I was definitely like impressed with all the fact that, like, as opposed to some of the previous discussions we have had, like, the thematical battles almost are very impressive.
Victor, you want to tell us some of your, like, whenever we first got started with this, we talked about watching it on a Sunday. On Monday, you were like, hey, did you guys start watching Berserk yet? You need me to clarify any lore issues for you? And I'm like, I don't know what a lore issue is at the moment to, like, what is a lore issue versus a spoiler for episode 15 at this moment?
Fair enough.
So now that we have finished our assigned reading, Victor, do you want to get into some of the lore parts that you like the best?
Yeah, sure. So this Skull Knight, one of the characters that's like completely absent from the anime. He's actually like, so I don't know if you remember that part where they go to that tower to rescue Griffith, and they find like the skulls with the brand on their like heads. But it's suggested that the Skull Knight, they basically go into the lore. They're like, yeah, this was like a dungeon built by this king called Geyseric, who was able to conquer vast areas, and it was said that God sent like 4 angels to punish him for his arrogance. And you realize, oh, that's the God Hand. They're talking about the God Hand. Mm-hmm. And they talk about how Geyseric would wear a mask with a skull on it. And you're like, the Skull Knight is Geyseric. And this, the Skull Knight is a kind of like transdimensional warrior. And that's why he's actually able to fight the God Hand, or try to. And he actually ends up rescuing Guts and Casca from the eclipse. But when he does that, he like specifically talks to that one member of the God Hand whose mouth is like torn open and he has a brain. His name is Void.
Yeah.
And you get the impression that they know each other. That, and he constantly fights with Nosferatu Zod, because Zod likes to fight. That's his entire thing.
Did you guys ever see Mars Attacks?
Yes.
That's what the brain dude made me think of the entire time.
Mars Attacks.
Exactly. One last thing and this can be cut depending on your response, Victor. One last thing I wanted to mention. Conrad and what's the other dude's name?
I have no idea, dude.
They look the exact same.
They really do. That's why I forget their names. They're both like fat, hunched over, weird faces.
There's like the two like
and Guildenstern.
Right. And then you have that one lady,
Slan,
lustful individual, and then big brains.
Yeah, the rest of the God Hand makes like more appearances throughout the show, or rather throughout the manga, of course. But it's pretty interesting. And I mean, one of the things that like blows my mind is you have to realize that all of these apostles had to have done exactly the same thing as Griffith to get to where they are. Mm-hmm. And what's really interesting is that later on in the series, there are like more apostles who aren't all like lustful monsters who are the worst of humanity. Like they're more of them turn up, and they're more, I guess, Griffith-like, and
or even less so. Yeah.
And that part is immensely interesting, because you're just like, how is it that all of these other people, like, again, Wild is the example we'll take from the manga. He was this really sadistic criminal who he literally just hangs out in jail because he's like, this is perfect. It's survival of the strongest. I'm the strongest. Nobody fucks with me. I like it here. He's an apostle, and they sent him after the group when they take Griffith. But not all of the apostles have the same motivation. A lot of them actually have like an instinct to help the God Hand, but some of them choose to ignore it. And that's very, it's compelling. Mm-hmm. It's really some really good stuff.
No, I particularly liked the current arc that I am reading is the Lost Children arc, and the bad guy, I guess, quote unquote, the apostle of choice. Not to get too much into it because that's not really our discussion, but her backstory essentially is like she was left and thrown away, and she had no one, and she had this relationship with the elves, and she wanted to become an elf. And
yeah, she liked the fairy tale so much.
The purest of intentions, corrupted by the greed of man, and now she's a demon.
Yeah, you remember that, I don't know if you remember, Andrew, but there's a part where Rickert is, like, hanging next to a lake, and he sees...
Yeah, and he sees the fairy.
That's the apostle Grant is talking about. That's the one that Guts goes to fight. I really like that arc in particular, because when you're reading it, like, if you removed all of the text, and I just showed you the images, Guts definitely looks like the bad guy. He's hunting, like, this elf... And this elf found, this like elf looking girl, and she finds like her old friend from the town, and she's trying to play with her, and Guts is like, this is the perfect opportunity to kill this apostle. She's totally distracted. I'll just cleave through them both. And yeah,
like the Black Prince arc, all of that sounds significantly more interesting than what I spent so much time watching.
Yeah, give it a read. You can definitely transition into Lost Children from where you are. We just told you all the differences, so definitely give it a read. It is really good.
I'll just wait for the rest of the anime to come out.
Yeah, no, I think my overall recommendation, it seems like, would be to definitely read it. Andrew, in your case, for those that might not enjoy the Golden Age arc, there's a definite shift in focus, it seems like, with all the following content, or at least like some of the thematical decisions are a little more grander.
Yeah.
So
if this was doing the meta narrative from The Princess Bride, Golden Age would be entirely gone. It was like, that's exposition, we don't need that.
That's crazy, because that's actually considered like one of the best arcs in the fandom anyway. Like, a lot of people are like, Golden Age #1, and I like it. It's probably in the top 3, but that's really funny that you have the exact opposite opinion. It's probably because of the anime, honestly.
Yeah. Hopefully we didn't corrupt your opportunity to continue
rise in
on
the Berserk
with the series.
fandom.
Right. Hey, you know what? The internet hates me last week. The internet's gonna hate you this week. How about that?
He's like, I know what makes you cheer.
Speaking of what the internet hates, or rather every fan hates, but also loves, Grant, what's your pitch for next week?
Nice. My turn, boys, for the pitch. All right. To steal Andrew's intro, which was totally stolen from the ESPN 30 for 30. What if I told you people die when they are killed?
No kidding.
And while that reference is completely and utterly, totally unrelated to what I'm talking about, my pitch is going to be the Fire Emblem series. Yes, Fire Emblem, very known for its concept of permadeath, amongst many other things. We will be spending the next 2 weeks playing various different games. Our aim is going to be, each of us is going to play the new Fire Emblem 3 Houses on the Nintendo Switch, and then we'll each be playing one of the retro games, presumably Game Boy or previous, depending on, dealer's choice there. My pitch, you'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll have a bunch of children, many, many children, even more waifus, or whatever the opposite of a waifu is. This game, husbando, yes. This
Can't
game
believe I know that.
is... I told you you're a weeb.
Fuck.
This game is my first introduction, believe it or not, to really, like, my love for Nintendo. I had Pokemon before, as did every single, 8-year-old boy. But Fire Emblem, for me, is the first interaction I had outside of that realm and outside of, like, it's the first time I realized, there's other types of games out there. There's games of story. There's games that can make me feel things. and really test my wills. So I'm excited. I hope you guys are excited. It's going to be a fantastic time, whether you like it or not. I will be bugging the ever-living crap out of you guys to make sure that you guys are feeling the exact same emotions that I'm feeling as I relive my childhood. In the meanwhile, for those listening, make sure to follow this podcast, spread the word, follow. We're going to get social media eventually. I know it's going to happen. Stop it. I'm going to do it. Yes. Make sure to spam us with all your questions, thoughts, criticisms, hate mail, love mail. Leave a review. Tell your friends. I'm sure your grandma loved this episode. Make sure your grandma tells her friends, and then her friends' friends. Yeah, maybe they have a, what's that one game that old people, Bridge Club. Yeah, maybe have them talk about it on their Bridge Club game night. Make sure to interact with us by wasting your next couple of weeks obsessing over the Fire Emblem franchise in its entirety. Love you all. Q Space Rock.